most Protestants, which we are, if you're not a Roman Catholic or Greek Orthodox or Russian Orthodox, you're a Protestant. But most Protestants disagree with this. But they still feel that Christ is present in communion. They still believe that. Lutherans, for example, will say that the bread and wine are transformed spiritually to the body and blood of Christ. They don't go to that literal physical state that the Roman Catholics do. Now, I don't know about Episcopals. Is that still their belief? But I'm not sure.
It's Protestant.
Yeah, okay.
It's Protestant.
Yeah. So that it's a spiritual presence in the Lutherans and maybe some others. Others say that the bread and the wine are purely symbolic. It's purely symbolic, and those differences still exist today. They still exist. If you talk with a Catholic brother or sister, they're going to say, "Oh man, that's the body and blood of Christ for sure." Well, and some will say, "Well, it's on the other extreme. Well, that's just really symbolic." So that debate still goes on. But whatever the case, Christ, let me say this, Christ is in communion somehow, in some mysterious way. I watched Angela cut that pita bread up this morning. Well, I didn't watch her, but I know what she did. It was done with holy hands, with a pizza roller. It's easy to do in that one. Barbara took the Welch's grape juice, I'm assuming maybe Publix brand, I don't know what it is. And that little cup filled up each one of those cups with holy hands. Christ is in this somehow, some mysterious way.
Amen.
And that's the reason communion is called a holy mystery. That's one of, and oh Lord, thank you, I'm just about through with my assignments. I got like 4 pages to write and I am done. Except going to Kentucky to take the classes, but I am done.
Amen.
Yeah, amen. You better believe it, brother. And the point of saying all that is I have one of the things that we too talk about is sacraments and worship. So I have learned a lot about communion. That's good. What it means, especially in the Methodist Church. But it is a holy mystery. There's a book, one of the books, I think I kept that one, most of them I gave away because I didn't never going to use it anymore, but it's called This Holy Mystery, and it's all about communion. A mystery. Well, we know what that is, but something that is difficult or impossible to understand or explain. That's the Google definition. It's a holy mystery. It's difficult to explain, maybe to a non-Christian. It's difficult to understand. I understand it, but I don't understand. That's the reason it's a holy. I know it's holy, but it's a mystery. Let's read John chapter 6, verses 48 through 56. Now this is in the long, Jesus is a long discourse here, like you always see in the Gospels. I'm going to pick it up at verse 48, and Jesus, that's one of the famous verses. I am the bread of life. Now, we know Jesus walked a loaf of bread. So there's some hints for you right there. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate manna in the wilderness, and they died. I can eat all the bread I want to. And I like sourdough bread, and I like pizza, but one day I'm going to die. am the living bread that came down out of heaven. If anyone eats this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread also which I shall give you for the life of the world is my flesh. Well, the Pharisees and the Sadducees were getting all worked up about this. In verse 52, they respond. The Jews therefore began to argue with one another, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? And Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in yourself. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him or her, whatever the case may be. Now I'm hesitant to say this, but I'm going to say it first and we'll go back and look at this. That is the reason those last, verse 53, 4, 5, and 6, the reason, and I hate to say it in this context, but Christians were accused of being cannibalistic. And that was one of the scriptures they used. And when you read it as you say it, if you read it just like that, I could see how people could get that. And that's not the case. You know that. If you're in here, and that's not the case. But that's what one of the critics of Christianity early on would say. But Jesus has already said, I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit, but it's clear to me that he's speaking metaphorically. He said, my body is, he says that in the previous verse, is my body is like bread. Like is a metaphor. When something is a metaphor, it's when you say it's like something. I think that's correct. And my blood, the blood in my veins is like that. My body and my blood are like food and drink. Like food and drink. He says that they're the source of eternal nourishment. They ate manna in the wilderness and they died. I'm going to eat a birthday cookie for my grandson who'll be 10 years old tomorrow. I'm not going to eat the whole cookie. But for my grandson who'll be 10 years old tomorrow, tomorrow, I might die from eating the cookie. But you know what I'm saying. We eat pizza, we eat chicken, we eat steak, we eat beef, we eat fish, we eat all stuff. We eat food. We got to have food every day, but we're going to die. It's not going to let us live forever. Jesus says, my body and my blood, you take from it, you will live forever. It is eternal nourishment. Those last few verses there about literally drinking the body and the blood and all that. Back in the day, the Roman Catholic Church says, well, we know we're not drinking Christ's blood or eating his body. So that means that it has to turn into that. You see the thinking? Now, I'm not an expert on Catholicism, but I think that's sort of the thinking. Back in 1500, superstition, mysticism was very prevalent. So the church would say, well, if we read this, it has somehow, in some mysterious way, it becomes the body and blood of Christ. We don't know how because it's a holy mystery. Again, I think it's clear that Jesus Jesus speaking metaphorically, or he said it. The bread is like his body. The contents of the cup is like his blood. You know, communion in the Methodist Church is rooted in the Church of England, of which John Wesley was a priest. John Wesley was a priest in the Church of England. You know, John Wesley never became a Methodist. He remained in the Church of England, him and his brother both, until they died. But anyway, he was a priest in the Church of England. And John Wesley did not believe that Christ was physically present in communions like the Catholics believe. He said, no, it just don't mean that. This is splitting theological hairs, and I can give you some fancy words, but I won't give you all those fancy words, you know, unless you just, oh, God, hear them fancy words. I'm not going to do it. Yeah, well, transubstantiation, consubstantiation, that's the two fancy words, and there's a difference there. But anyway, he said, no, he's here, but he's not physically here. He doesn't physically become his body and blood. Or it's not spiritually like the Lutherans, and maybe others might say. It's not like that either. But he did believe Christ was present. Wesley would never deny. He was a big communion person. He was big on communion, and rightfully so. So what is it then? Well, Wesley believed, and I don't know if he used this word, but he said that Christ was virtually present. You know, that's a common word now. You know, virtual this, everything's sort of virtual. Now I can't think of what virtual. I know what it means, but I could give you the definition. Maybe I should look at it. But, you know, he's virtually present. Personally, I'm torn between the virtualism of Wesley and the symbolism. I tend to lean toward it being purely symbolic. That's me personally. You don't have to believe that way. You know, the Bible don't say a whole lot about this. But I know that I know that I know that Jesus is present somehow, somewhere. It's a holy mystery. I have taken loaves of bread in communion in my life, and had gallons of grape juice probably in my life. I know that Jesus is present. You know, communion symbolizes the infusion of Christ's life into ours. An infusion of His life into our life. For what? For the forgiveness of sins. This infusion is the great mystery. There's, I say it again, a holy mystery. But Jesus is there, nonetheless. You know, let us today, as we do on every time we receive the body and blood of Christ, let us feel His presence. You may feel it different than I do. It's an individual thing. If you come up and just say, well, I'm going to take, here's the bread, here's the juice, you know, okay, yeah, that's something we do, you know. You might not feel His presence. As you come forward, I pray that you would pray, Lord, let me feel your presence. As I bite into this pita bread, as I drink this Welch's grape juice. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all